Wesley So is in tremendous shape for this year's Crunchlabs tournament, but Magnus Carlsen, not to be outdone, he's been on the beach and all, working on the abs, 1,000 crunches, and yet they still found themselves paired against each other in the Big Fat Losers quarterfinals. This is exciting because it went to an Armageddon game. Both the first two rapid plays were drawn, no surprises there. Wesley's kind of the new drawnish Geary these days. So Armageddon means that after Magnus goes pawn e4 and we see e5 in response, Wesley just has to draw the game to get the victory. Magnus has to win therefore, but he's got the extra time as we can see on the left. This is online chess, but Magnus is handicapped. He's playing on a touchscreen tablet, doesn't even have a mouse. Wesley, of course, has his chess mouse, big advantage to Wesley out of the opening. What does Magnus play here? Well, knight f3, of course, and both players doing it with a Winnie. Is Magnus gonna go bishop c4 or b5? Drum roll, please. He goes for a Gucci Reza piano, so named after this guy with the most epic chews in the entire chess scene. Shoes rather. Now we see bishop c5 and Magnus is sorely tempted to go knight c3, set up a massive 8-piece Jenga tower on the c-file, but he resists the urge, castles the king. Now we see knight f6 and d3 followed by d6. We've got two lots of connect threes, both players giving each other a nudge. Now c3 from Magnus. He was still itching for that knight move, but this dominates the black knight on c6. Also looks for expansion, but before Magnus can do anything on the queen's side, we see Wesley go into Clamptown. Population Magnus. Rook e1. Castle's now played. We see the classic fist bump on camera. The players explode it out. Common amongst the elite professionals. h3, h6 played, gives the king some Lufthansa, controls g4 and g5 respectively, and now this is when you know you're a classy player. You retreat a minor piece without it even being attacked. Epic chess from Magnus. Wesley finally gets all his bits out, challenges that strong sniper from afar, and what does Magnus do? He tucks it back. He's either a complete noob or a goat. Has he had his Gatorade for breakfast? Well, what he's got planned here is a d4 expansion. Then the bishop starts coming to life, protecting the pawn, etc. So Wesley goes bishop a7, anticipating the d4 move. But after knight b to d2, who's first to the punch in the centre? It's Wesley So. d5 for the high five. Kasparov rushes over, gives him one. Everyone's nodding their approval, watching on the game. And after Magnus takes, look at this. The queen centralising, 8 legs sprawled in every direction, a black widow spider. What a piece. Magnus's own queen can only meekly go to the e2 square, but it does provide pressure on the e5 pawn. What does Wesley do? Rook fe8, an x-ray defense. If you start going for this stuff to win a pawn, bad idea. This one moves out the way with tactics, and the rook not only hits the queen, but an undefended rook on e1. You know, imagine this knight has moved, no longer defended. So Magnus, of course, goes knight f1. Standard maneuver, pops in on dad for a cup of tea. He's very happy, loves visitors, and after rook ad8, Wesley centralising the broadside cannons. This knight's on its way with a fare thee well from dad. And now a very committal move from Wesley So, but a good one according to Stocktopus. Pawn b5. Beatrice gaining space with Audrey the a-pawn. They're having a spot of space gain on the 5th, and after this move of bishop e3 from Magnus, he finally gets his bits out. Recommended on the chessboard, not on the beach, unless you're on a certain kind of beach, right? Now we see an exchange. Queen recaptures, and now these are some of the main moves of Stock Barnacle, especially the queen kind of nudging back or some a4 space gain, but none of them played. What does Wesley So do? He's in great shape. So he drops back with this bishop and he's whispering lightweight baby, nothing but a peanut. He's looking to remaneuver to the long diagonal, but that takes time. Meanwhile, Magnus centralizes the pony and there's big problems here, but it's not obvious at first why. I've done some clicking. I've saved the time there, and so if you're not yet subscribed, do consider become a Grandmaster within weeks, but results do vary. Now there's a threat to take on f6, shatter the pawns, but also pop a pony on c5. So that's why Wesley takes, given the question mark, not the favourite of the engine, it wanted knight h5 and let the knight hit c5. But humanly, Wesley doesn't want that. Queen e6 again preferred, allowing queen c5, but queen d6 is played to stop the queen invasion. It allows this rook to centralise. The queen backpedaling to e7 here, still keeping the eye on the c5 square, but now there's a problem, because Magnus can lift the rook into the game. He's like, do you even lift, bro? And the problem is, once the bishop left e6, now the rook can no longer be stopped. Therefore, pawn under fire. Before Magnus can take it, Wesley pushes, but say it ain't so. Wesley's a pro. His knight's about to go. He's got to defend it. Look at the weakness of the last move. Bishop b7 played, just like Arnie, the bishop's back, but there's a big problem, because Magnus can now cash in. He decides to take on c6, best move, the knight was defending 2 pawns, and now which pawn would you take first here? Test your skills. I'll give you 703 seconds. Do feel free to show your workings down below. The best way to play is not rook takes on e5. We've gone to the back cave. Analysis mode. Looks great because you hit the queen, then you can win a second pawn, but you've opened the file. This rook can now crash through and black's getting some huge counterplay. Strike yourself with a wooden stick if you would have taken this one. Taking here is the best move. Now why doesn't Wesley take on c3? Well then it allows Magnus to bring the queen in, huge pressure against the bishop, and e5. So once it's saved, another pawn does drop. White's doing great. So instead, we don't see takes, we see queen d6 played. Now this move of queen c5, Magnus itching to get those queens off the board, loves it. Few spectators start bleating, and now Wesley decides to take on c3. Magnus recaptures with the queen. Best way to play, keep the c-file open even though he wanted the queens off. And now you've simply got to go bishop b7 or bishop a8 or rook e6 at the very least. But what do we see? A cardinal sin in the eyes of Ben Feingold. Pawn to f6, and there's something very suspect about this move. You can't quite put your finger on it at first. It's like this dodgy t-shirt, something weird about it, very suspect clobber here on Epic Cheese. The move now to play, which Magnus misses, is rook a6. He needs to go back to tactics school. This bishop's simply dropping off the board because you can't move it or you lose the queen. You can defend, you can intensify the pressure, that's bye-bye bishop. So that's what should have been played, but Magnus goes rook c5. Huge pressure coming down the c-file here, and now after it's defended, b4's on the board. You can actually save the bishop. This one slides across to cover the b5 square. Knight h4 from Magnus, he's unleashing hellfire. King h7 looking for g6, knife f5, hits that queen, it's stumbling back, and now this is a brilliant move. You can bring the second rook, but Magnus goes for pawn a4, and you can't even take with the bishop, or c7 collapses, and with it the entire black position. So what do we see instead? Wesley playing with the rook, but that is an ugly move. Stuck behind its own c-pawn. Miserable defense. Now we see b5 pushing the bishop back. a5 now played. This rook drops back to cover the second one. Prepare to meet b6. And after f3 from Magnus, Wesley decides he doesn't want to wait for Magnus to push p here. So he goes pawn to c ships. Have you ever seen an uglier move? b6 played, and that bishop on a8 is almost as horrendous as modern Star Wars. Now we get bishop b7 trying to bring it back to life. Franken bishop. Queen b3 e3 played, hits a more pertinent diagonal, and I love the manoeuvring from Magnus, because after rook ed8, he brings this rook back to c1 here. Why would you let black start pushing the c-pawn? Well, look at the idea. Rook ed1, and there's huge problems. If you play the move of queen e8, very standard, right? Move out the way, cover the rook, then you can take, and there's no good way to recapture. If you take with the rook, white simply wins another pawn, and if you take with the queen, you've relinquished control here. Bang, double attack. You get an absolutely kebabbed on the 7th rank. Not ideal. So we come back here. That's why we see Wesley play the most explosive move. Pawn to c-shore, queen under fire, but Magnus takes. Lets his lady drop off the board because he's taken here with check. A Zwischenzug, an in-between move, intermezzo. Now the king goes, and rook b1, you've got a double problem. Bishop and pawn. Of course you save the bishop, that's worth 3, but now the pawn drops off the board. Magnus, 3 to the good, and he's up on the clock. What to say? Rook c2 played, rook c7 offers an exchange of rooks. Wesley dodges, trying to keep hopes alive. b7 played, the red carpet rolled out, and after rook g8, you just have to avoid one last trick. If you make a baby girl, well then you've just walked into a draw. King sidesteps, can't come here, and bang, you just get this repetition. Don't do that. Magnus, of course, too long in the tooth, doesn't push the pawn. Instead, he goes knight to e3. Defending g2, Wesley throws in the towel, resigns the game. Because this is about to go through. If you take, well fine, you're still getting absolutely slaughtered. White a piece ahead. If you don't take, I mean, what to say? Rook b8 here. What's the best way to win? Sorry, my phone's going off. That's probably a good way to end it. Well, knight d5 could be played here. All roads lead to Rome, just completely dead position. This a big threat, by the way, to then set up these mate threats. Arabian checkmate. We come back here. I think that must be the Global Chess Committee. They're about to get back to me on a new opening variation I've been looking to. I best go. Thanks very much for watching. For another epic game of chess, check out the video on screen, and I hope to see you again soon. Cheers.